around 2035, 2039 even, German armed forces are to become the strongest conventional armed forces in Europe. I dare say that actually the biggest breakthrough, much bigger than the war in Ukraine, was the election victory of Donald Trump in elections in the fall 2024. The idea of serving as a soldier still is very much unpopular and controversial.
Hi, welcome to Polish Insights on Global Affairs with the Polish Institute of International Affairs think tank, in short PISM. PISM is your go-to source for expert perspectives on the most pressing developments in world politics and security. I'm your host, Agnieszka Łaszczuk, and joining me today is Łukasz Jasiński from PISM. Łukasz Jasiński holds a PhD in political sciences and as an analyst specializes in Germany's foreign and domestic policy. And in today's episode, we're turning our attention to something truly unprecedented, we might say. Last month, Germany unveiled a new long-term military strategy aimed at transforming its armed forces, known as Bundeswehr, and boosting its military capabilities. Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius said the country is planning to build what he called Europe's strongest conventional army. Many details of the plan remain classified, but from what has been published, what are the main stated aims of this strategy? What does this strategy entail, Łukasz?
This strategy is a part of a bigger picture. Namely, it is a part of a longer process of refurbishing the Bundeswehr, refurbishing German armed forces after many years of negligence throughout Angela Merkel's time. And when Germany enjoyed the so-called dividend of peace, so spent like around 1%, 1 point something percent of on defense. Now they are aiming at 5% of GDP in the longer run. This strategy, as you mentioned, is partly classified. So we are presented, Minister Pistorius presented officially to the public opinion just a shorter version, a shorter document, without any specific details. But from this strategy, we see that in the longer run, I mean, in the perspective of the next decade, around 2035, 2039 even, German armed forces are to become the strongest conventional armed forces in Europe in terms of the size, but also in terms of technological advance.
So what will be the new size? What about reservists? Yeah, because the document also mentions those forces.
Yes, in this document we can encounter a figure of total 460,000, both soldiers and reservists. Just to compare, at this point in time, Bundeswehr has about 184,000 of professional soldiers. The thing is that according to German law at the moment, there is no proscription. So the army is to remain professional, is to remain based on volunteers. There is some system of benefits for volunteers, like financial benefits or some possibilities of, for instance, making a driving license for free while being a soldier. But still, there's for me an open question whether this size of the Bundeswehr, so this 460,000 soldiers plus reservists, is to be achieved only based on volunteers.
Germany has had an army for decades. Why does it only have a military strategy now? How does it fit into the broader transformation of European security following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022?
Yes, this whole breakthrough and this whole change of Germany's perception of the role of the army, security, started in 2022 after Russia unleashed full-scale invasion on Ukraine. And remember, at that time, Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced Zeitenwende, so the turning point, or rather, to be more precise, he declared that Europe finds itself in a turning point, and therefore Germany needs to fit in. To fit in, there was a special fund of 100 billion euros created in order to beef up military spendings. But I dare say that actually the biggest breakthrough much bigger than the war in Ukraine was election victory of Donald Trump. In elections in the fall 2024, he's come back to the White House when there was quite clear, especially after famous speech of Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference, when he attacked Germany and European allies from numerous reasons, but also for not doing enough. This was the biggest breakthrough, and I think that since that point, so since the beginning of 2025, it became quite clear that Germany still need to do much, much more than they did, not only during Merkel's time, but also during the Chancellor Olaf Scholz's time. To make long story short, Germany's approach now is to make some kind of a bid towards USA. If the Republican administration, if President Trump, if MAGA movement await or expect the Europeans to do much more in terms of providing defense, security, conventional deterrence of Russia, then the answer of Germany under Chancellor Friedrich Merz is, okay, just name it, we have it. Okay, we understand your argument and we are ready to transform ourselves and transform our military, but still in some, of course, longer perspective. It has also to do with an idea of new NATO's posture. So the posture of NATO in which Americans are still involved in the alliance. They provide nuclear deterrence. But the biggest part of conventional deterrence deterrence from Russia, of course, is to be provided simply by the Europeans themselves. So especially by Germany, by France, also by Poland to some extent.
So how does the government of Friedrich Merz see the role of Germany in NATO then in the future, of course, also in the context of this strategy?
Germany should play a center role in the NATO's European pillar. It has to do with creation of the biggest and most technologically advanced army, but still, once again, we are talking about the perspective of around a decade, which it will last a while or more than a while. But what is more, the role of Germany, because of its geography, is also to serve as a strategic hub, as a central hub for also American support for Europe in case of any emergency from Russia or some direct threat from Russia. I mean here the role of German railway, motorways, but also first and foremost the biggest harbors like Hamburg, for instance.
You've touched upon it to a certain extent. This strategy is heavily informed by the so-called Russian threat. How does the German government plan to deter Russia in the future then?
The deterrence of Russia should be provided two-folded or rather three-folded. On the one hand, it is to be achieved by simply building up the presence of the Bundeswehr on the NATO's eastern flank. And I mean here especially the continuation and finalization of a process of placing their Bundeswehr brigade in Lithuania. This is a project that was inaugurated during Chancellor Olaf Scholz's term, and now it is being continued by the current government. We are talking about around 5,000 soldiers that are to station there on permanent basis. This is for the first time from the end of the Second World War. German soldiers will be stationing in other countries on a permanent basis. But still, we are talking only about the brigade. This is 5,000 soldiers, so relatively small, but significant amount. The second pillar is this generally speaking, beefing up military spending, modernization of the Bundeswehr, making it stronger, making it more technologically advanced. So simply buying new types of equipment, also trying to build it up in terms of the amount of soldiers and reservists. But on the third place, still somewhere behind, there is a question of nuclear deterrence. Germany do not have any ambitions to create their own nuclear deterrence, but still are willing to cooperate closely with France, with UK, and of course to still stick to American nuclear deterrence, American and so-called nuclear umbrella, not to mention the still ongoing project that has its roots deeply in the times of the Cold War, so the nuclear sharing mission.
Another point which is raised in the context of this strategy is whether Germany is actually able and will be able to deliver on the plans that we're discussing, especially when it comes to manpower, as we discussed. Will there be enough political will? Will there be enough funding? You've mentioned that's the plan. What do you see, in other words, as the greatest obstacles to realizing these plans?
Let me put it this way. I suppose that at least to the end of this decade, there is no problem without money, with money, because thanks to the reform of the debt break rule launched by Friedrich Merz in March last year and in April last year, there is no problem with additional funding. The problem can be, or the weaker point of this idea can be, a lack of volunteers, because in some part of German society that still is very much attached to the pacifist ideals. The idea of serving as a soldier still is very much unpopular and controversial, especially a soldier that can actually be sent to a mission in order to kill the adversary. I mean here, Russia. Furthermore, there is also one problem that cannot be solved with any kind of money or financial benefits, namely the will of fight, the will of standing for Germany and standing for the allies. Last year, according to one of the opinion polls, when there was a question to especially younger generation, if in case of war, in case of invasion on Germany, are you willing, or would you be willing to stand and fight? There was only 17% of people who said yes, without any doubts, of course.
That's striking.
Yes, and this is this attitude that needs to be changed, that can be changed, in my opinion, but only in the longer perspective. And this is a problem that actually cannot be solved by money, because it is more an attitude, it is more a sense that, okay, either this perspective of Russian aggression is like far, far away because Germany are in the middle of the continent, there are eastern flank countries that would be the potential battlefield. Perhaps there will be some diplomatic solution when it comes to war in Ukraine, so on and so on. Secondly, there is also a sense that, okay, perhaps, and this is, I think, the biggest threat, not only for allies, but also for German democracy, there is also a sense that because Germany are stuck in many social problems, economical problems, perhaps there's nothing to defend, simply. Perhaps the Federal Republic of Germany is not worth defending. And this is the most striking, and this is the biggest threat also to German democracy, by the way. This is like to answer your question. Here I see the biggest potential problems, because here there is a role of politicians, there is a role of journalists, opinion makers, so to speak, just to present to the public opinion facts that Russia is and will be, in the longer run, the biggest strategic threat, not only for Lithuania or for Poland or for Finland, but also for Germany and the whole European Union.
Let's go back to the relationship between Germany and the United States. Recently, the United States has announced a withdrawal of about 5,000 troops from Germany. How does it change the context of this strategy?
Well, yes, situation is quite volatile when we are discussing it, but it seems that on the one hand, the US have sent many diplomatic signals that generally there will be some kind of reduction.
Possibly not only in Germany.
That's right, but generally the reduction of US troops in Europe, because of the fact that the USA is now focused mainly on the Western Hemisphere, rivalry with China, and so on. So we have war with Iran also. But the problem is that it seems that the style of this decision and the moment of this decision, when it was announced, was not connected to this long-range idea of changing the character of NATO, changing the character of Americans' presence in Europe, to which Germany and other allies are trying to accommodate. But that at the end of the day, it was mainly fueled by Donald Trump's emotions, by the sense that he was somehow disappointed with Chancellor Friedrich Merz, because Chancellor Merz criticized him, criticized war with Iran. There was a sentence by the German Chancellor that the US are now being humiliated by Iran. So this gives a sense that on the one hand we are trying to achieve some kind of compromise with the US in the framework of NATO as close allies, and that more or less we are doing it. But at the end of the day, something can be undermined or a little bit or changed from one day to another because of Donald Trump's bad mood or some bad emotions. So this is a factor that can be a new challenge for NATO and for the alliance, for the transatlantic alliance.
Definitely. And last but not least, let's take a slightly different perspective. There is a striking historical dimension here. Germany's rearmament might stir some historical echoes, uneasy historical echoes, especially in countries like Poland. How do Central and Eastern European allies actually feel about this plan? Is there reassurance? Is there anxiety?
I don't know the public opinion polls in Poland about it. I am not even aware if there are some, because this is relatively
Probably
new
there
topic.
aren't any, or there haven't been any yet.
Well, my guess is, on the one hand, of course, I understand that because of the historical reason, there can be some kind of resentment. The Germans are now building up their armed forces. They have economical potential to do it. They have very strong industry, so also technological capabilities to do it. So I understand that due to historical reasons, there can be some kind of skepticism towards it. On the other hand, if we start with the assumption that the process of changing the shape of NATO will be continued, because it didn't start with Donald Trump, actually. It started many years before. I mean, this pivot to Asia was announced by Barack Obama. So the Americans, we had Obama, we had Donald Trump's first term, Joe Biden's term, now we have Donald Trump's second term. The Americans have been for many years appealing to Europeans to do more for their own defense. They've been signalizing that, okay, we are not the character of our alliance will need to be changed. And from this point of view, I think that there can be some kind of reassurance that actually, okay, at least there is an attempt of making this transformation of NATO in these very difficult times when we have aggressive Russia on our border, when we have war in Ukraine, that there is at least an attempt of making it in the form of kind of a process when there is, one of the allies is limiting its direct engagement, but we have other allies that can try to fill up to fill some gaps. So I think that actually it is very much mixed. As far as I know, the Bundeswehr brigade in Lithuania is regarded very, very positive. And also I heard because there were also rotation missions of different types of Bundeswehr soldiers here in Poland. Also, we had a mission between December and March. We had a mission of Eurofighter planes in Malbork Air Base. We had a deployment of Patriot missiles in Zamojszczyzna region and also in Rzeszów-Jasionka Airport. And as far as I know, it was generally regarded as something positive, as an allied mission, and what is also very important, as a mission in the framework of NATO. So in a broader format, just to also keep all these historical reminiscences and resentments under control, so to speak.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Polish Insights on Global Affairs. Your host was Agnieszka Łaszczuk, and my guest today was Łukasz Jasiński from the Polish Institute of International Affairs, in short, PISM think tank. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and thank you, Łukasz, for your insights.
Thank you so much.